Hey everybody, thank you so much for staying tuned and watching my interviews here at CPAC. As you know, we're finding ways to fight for freedom, secure our freedoms, save our country, bring more people together that are doing that. And with me today is Neil Mammen. As we say in the South, though, where I'm from, we say mom and them. That's how we pronounce it. Neil, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you're with an organization called Every Black Life Matters.
That's correct.
And I find the twist, we'll say, a little bit interesting, but I'm going to let you explain that.
Well, the goal of our organization was to find a real solution to African American plight and to give people an option besides BLM. Because a lot of people were being fooled by BLM. They were thinking, well, this is all about black lives, so it's something we should support. And in fact, we had friends who went out to support BLM because they want people not to think that they're racist, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that BLM does anything but support black lives. In fact, most of their stances, most of their platforms are precisely why there is black plight today. For instance, we can look through, they're against the nuclear family. Well, fatherhood is probably one of the biggest reasons why the African American community is the way they are. And that was planned, by the way. It happened by LBJ back in the 70s when he sent 100,000 social workers into the black communities to convince mothers to kick fathers out. And literally kick fathers out. I mean, there were social workers, we've heard stories of social workers saying, why don't you kick that bum out? I can get you twice as much money per child if there's no man in the house. Or at least hide his coat and his shoes when I come over, right?
Exactly right.
That whole thing was going on. And they were trying to kick the fathers out. Well, why were they trying to kick the fathers out? Because they wanted to make the African American community completely dependent on the Democrat Party so that they would vote Democrat for the next 200 years, which is exactly what
Exactly what he said. And you know what? And not only did they send the social workers in there, but what they also did is with the policies that they created to help for them to get assistance, had the requirement that they could not have, a father in the home. And I'd also like to point out, I don't know if I got this information from you or not, but before these policies were put in place by LBJ, that the
fatherless rate was 27%. Today it's 72%.
So it's flipped.
It's flipped. Basically, since only about a quarter of the families were fatherless, and now it's almost three-quarters
of the family are fatherless.
Yeah, and you have to understand what that causes. If you have a fatherless society, men, in fact, I was just talking to a man who works here in this hotel who came from Ivory Coast. Now, and we had something in common because I was born in Ghana, which is right next door. And so, and I explained this because he asked me about my T-shirt, and I said, well, this is the anti-BLM T-shirt. And he goes, I thought BLM was good. They're for black people. I said, no, they're against fathers. I said, on their website it says, we're against the nuclear family. And he goes, how can you be against families? How can you be against fathers?
So Black Lives Matter is against the nuclear family,
exactly.
And they say it on their
website.
on their
website. Now they're taking it off since, but we have screenshots of that.
Okay, but you guys are for the nuclear family.
We are for the nuclear family. We're for traditional family, for fatherhood. And let me go further with this. What happens when you have fatherless kids is you have gangs and violence because those young men are looking for some leader. They're looking for a father figure, and they're going to be violent. They're going to be more ruthless. They're going to be, and the young women are going to be looking for male approval, so they're going to get sexually active earlier. And so all this happens now. This feeds into the schools. The schools start spending more time dealing with gangs and less with teaching. So the literacy rate in the African American community in the 30s, at the height of racism, was 70%. Today, you're lucky in the inner city if it's 17%.
So I did a podcast last week on work ethic. And I think that work ethic is another way that our families are being destroyed in our country. Not only our freedoms and our liberties are being destroyed because of a lack of work ethic, but we learn work ethic in a nuclear family.
Absolutely.
Now granted, single parents can do a great job, maybe even better sometimes, teaching their children how to have a good work ethic. But in the nuclear family, the work ethic, is something that.
Well, all the indications all the studies have shown that children need a male father and a female mother. It's very clear because fathers bring certain things, mothers bring certain things.
Exactly right.
You can't duplicate them. If you ever put a child in a single parent family, it's unfortunate. And they have to make do, but you never want to create that situation. It's like going to somebody and saying, you can live with one arm. so let's chop off your arm.
Yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, you can
Yeah,
live
you
with one
can,
arm.
but why?
But is that something we want to be doing to people? And that's exactly what we're doing to kids when we remove the father out of the house.
So I'll ask you this: So does your organization, Every Black Life Matter, does it just provide information and bring awareness, or do you all actually do anything to fix the problems?
So we have a lot of solutions. One, we want people to understand where the problems lie. And so two, we're trying to work with legislators. We want to change this. How did we get to this father situation? Is we were putting money and encouraging fathers to leave the home. How do we solve it? Now, I don't like giving money. I think welfare is a problem. It's going to cause long term. But we cause this problem by welfare. How about we reverse it with a better form of welfare, right? We can't get rid of welfare overnight.
Right.
So what we're recommending is that the Republicans go in and they say, for every father that's in the home that's genetically related to the kids and is married to the mother, you get more money on welfare.
I love this.
Less.
I've been saying this forever. Have you been listening to my podcast?
I probably have. And we may have talked about this last time too, because I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, this is what it's about. I mean, when the problem is government, often creates bigger problems, with a Band-Aid
Yep.
solution that they offer.
And then they blame everybody else.
They
for the
blame
problems that
everybody
they
else,
caused themselves.
but they don't create a pathway
To-
to get out of the situations
They don't create
that they've
yeah.
created and created their solution for.
Because government is not rewarded when you become independent of government. Government is only rewarded when you are dependent on government. For instance, if you've got your little fiefdom in the welfare department and you say, hey, I have reduced the welfare rolls to half, you're going to get half your staff fired.
Exactly right.
And your pay is going to go down. So they're like, no, I've doubled the welfare rolls. Oh, great, here's a raise. You got to do
It's
more
no
work.
different than these bureaucracies that have a budget of X dollars, and at the end of the year they're buying pallets of paper and supplies
Yeah.
and everything because we
lose it.
Yeah, we either use that budget, or we lose it for next year.
Exactly.
So I completely understand. So you guys are offering solutions to Congress, to people in the communities, finding solutions. What are the solutions that you guys see as
Well, one of them obviously is the school vouchers, because the schools are so bad in the inner cities. 80% of African American parents want vouchers to take their kids out of those crime-infested schools into a private school. But the Democrats and the unions won't let them do that, right? So that's the next thing, right? And then, of course, there's the whole idea of the genocide that's happening in African American communities. There's 44 million African Americans today. There would have been 64 million. That means 50% of them were killed. You know where? In the abortion mills. They were killed before they could be born. But they were killed. So that's a genocide. Anytime you
Exactly
wipe out
right, yeah.
50% of one group of people, one ethnicity, that's a genocide.
Sure.
So that's exactly what's happening here. But sadly, all of it has been paid by Congress, paid by the government. Because every time you go to a Planned Parenthood, and by the way, 80% of all Planned Parenthoods are in 13% of the population, black population. Why is 80% of Planned Parenthoods in 13% of the population?
Well, because of the need, right? Because is it need?
No, it's not because of need. It's because the government's paying for it.
It's not.
Somebody say, they need those services. There's so many other services they can do.
That they could use better to get them out of poverty,
That don't cost
get them hope, get them better solutions,
Right.
get opportunity to their communities. Because when you build families and support families, you get more out of it. So where do you think that freedoms are most under attack in our country?
Well, I think they're everywhere. I mean, obviously we've got a huge problem with our government overreach.
Right.
Our government is basically bribed and colluded with other area, like the CCP and people like that, okay? There's a lot of people in it for gain. Our biggest problem with the government is that they have created a dependent class.
Right, exactly
They
right.
are depending on, and now understand the dependent class is not just the people getting welfare. It's the people who work for the government, right? They have no incentive
Right.
to improve anything. So imagine if 50% of the population work for the government, and if you take all the people on welfare and all the people who work for the government, and you add them up, and they're over 51%, we will never get out of this mess until we're bankrupt.
Because when
or overrun.
you're working for government, you get your 4 weeks paid vacation, you get all
get a
your health
pension,
care,
you get everything.
pension, everything. You work for 20 years, you get the rest of your life, and then all those pensions add to our unfunded liabilities,
Right.
which makes our national debt even bigger, which creates even bigger problems.
Absolutely.
So do you have any other ideas on what the best way to fight it is?
Well, education is
For
one.
freedom.
Well, yeah, my best idea is, and this is the idea that I've been pushing for the last 20 years, is that the church needs to get involved. I wrote a book called Jesus is Involved in Politics. Why aren't you? Why isn't your church? And it shows how the church has been the fundamental change for good for the last 2,000 years. In fact, the only reason why gladiatorial combat is illegal is because the church got involved. The only reason we banned slavery is because the church got involved. The only reason that you don't throw women on their husbands' funeral pyres in India is because the church got involved. The only reason
On their funeral what?
they would take widows and they would burn them alive when their husbands were burned in their funeral pyre in India.
You gotta be kidding me.
And then William Carey, a missionary, went to the governor and said, "We got to stop this," and it was stopped. Right? I mean, and in Africa, they were killing twins because they thought it was superstition. They thought it was horrible, that it was evil when you had twins, so they would kill twins. Missionaries stopped that. Christians stopped that. We stopped it there. We stopped it here. Child prostitution was legal, and an American stopped it here in America.
Right.
And that was recently.
And slavery used to be legal, and we stopped.
We stopped that, right? Again, there are thousands and thousands of laws that Christians have stopped. And here's a dangerous and scary thing. When the church abdicated that responsibility, the culture went back to their pagan roots. Look at Nazi Germany. Just recently, the church said we're going to stay out of it. Nazi Germany goes right back to its pagan roots of what? Sacrificing the weak and killing the weak.
Neil Mammen, you are amazing. How can people find your first book and
Thank you.
Jesus in Politics,
Yeah, so-
and about every Black Lives
so
Matters?
Every Black Life Matters is at everyblm.com, everyblm.com, and my book Jesus is Involved in Politics is just jesusisinvolvedinpolitics.com.
That's an easy one.
Or just look up Jesus Politics Neil and you'll find it somewhere.
Well, I like to search Jesus is Involved in Politics.com.
Yeah.
Amazing. Neil Mammen, thank you
you.
so much for coming on. I really appreciate
it.
You really inspire me to help find ways to fight for freedom.
Well, thank
by,
you.
By looking at what you're doing for freedom.
Well, thank you.
And everybody else, please look up Neil Mammen and his organization, and you might find some ways to fight for freedom. And if you keep watching more of my interviews, you're going to see other people who are also fighting for freedom. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.